Okay, Harry, thank you very much for examining me. It was a thrilling experience.
It's been a pleasure, Ben.
Thinking about those 3 interviews and also just your experience in general, what do you think makes a good topic for a phonology presentation, that first 5 minutes?
Right. Well, I'm not so sure that you can talk about what makes a good topic in terms of subject. It's more a case of what people do with it. And certain seemingly obvious things that are not always adhered to. First of all, people remember they've only got 5 minutes to talk about this, so it cannot be too broad. And I think the second thing is having some kind of balance there. Obviously, we want the balance between looking at it on the theoretical side of things and what you do practically. But I always tend to almost think that you can split it up into 3. First of all, you're talking about perhaps a little bit of the theoretical background to the point that you're addressing. And then you might be looking at the problems that learners have with this specific area. And then, of course, you're talking about, well, what do I do about it? And that will probably be the biggest bit of it. And I always personally like it when, usually people come in with some kind of, they've got an activity they use and that they actually bring it in with you. But I quite like it when people also say, well, how they deal with this when it's in a more integrated way. Yeah, sure, we can talk about what we're doing here in discrete terms and how it helps, but also perhaps, well, what do you do in the lesson overall when this thing keeps popping up?
I suppose that keeps a nice sort of practical focus to it.
Yeah.
And other examiners, I've got feedback from other examiners that said very similar things. That the time is an issue. When I was doing those, I found it really difficult to get it all into just 5 minutes. So you've really got to be concise, know your terminology well, not to waffle. Narrow and specific is the key.
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of trainees do go and do something where they're just contrasting two phonemes that perhaps cause problems, 2 vowel sounds, something like that. And I don't really have a problem with that as long as it's done in the right way. It seems very straightforward, perhaps slightly unambitious. But again, we come back to this point, you've only got 5 minutes, and if it's very closely tied down in personal experience, obviously a place where you've worked and a thing that you haven't just picked it out of a book, I'll do that, I worked in Spain once, that's the problem they had, but something that has, that you have genuinely noticed and you have genuinely tried to work on and thought about, I think it can be very good and it fits very neatly within that 5 minutes. Not that I'm encouraging people to do that, but I'm not equally against it either.
Keith, another good point now I think you made about not just taking it out of a book. That needs to have some experience somehow.
I think so. We don't want it just to sound like something you've learned by rote.
Yeah, okay, very important. And that's what some of the examiners have said, but maybe it's just contrasting to consonant sounds of but and but, that maybe there's not enough expansion from that. So you need to, as you
it's
say,
the application for teaching that's going to...
You need to own it and apply it to teaching. Okay.
Yeah.
So conversely, I suppose if we're saying things that make a bad topic or a bad presentation, it's going to be too broad, too much, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and overrunning. I mean, to a certain extent, if somebody goes and spends their whole 5 minutes talking about the theory of the problems, then strictly in terms of our marking, there's a whole swathe of stuff that you could not give them a single mark for because they haven't talked about it at all. So it's absolutely vital. And I think the other thing as well that we talked about how you deal with it in terms of breaking it up and in terms of the timing, etc., etc. But I think also in these presentations, you've got to have a pretty high level of terminology that you're using there. I mean, you've researched this beforehand. Perhaps not terminology we'd be expecting them to use or even know in the 15-minute interview at the end. But this is your baby here. You should have those phrases to hand and use them.
And I suppose if we're just my favourite little thing, just referring to the off-call framework of this is a level 7 interview, and so there is a practical application. but the knowledge, the off-ball state that knowledge at level 7 should be understands different theoretical and methodological perspectives. I mean, and critically analyzes, interprets, evaluates these critical theoretical perspectives. So in order to do that, there needs to be some use of terminology. Briefly demonstrated there, but as you suggest, maybe more so in the data section. All right, for the phonology transcription, I think a lot of trainees worry about this. What do you think candidates really struggle with?
I don't know there's any particular area as such. I find that the actual phonemes people don't really have problems with, on the whole, obviously. More problems with marking the stress, marking the intonation, perhaps picking up on the features of connected speech, which of course are always going to be in there. They're always going to be in there. To my mind, to my experience, I haven't had problems with people not being able to complete it.
I mean, 5 minutes seems like a long time, because there's not actually that much to write.
No. That's not a problem. I mean, I don't know about the experience of other examiners, but to my mind, to my experience, that's not a problem.
Okay, so mostly features of connected speech. Maybe some other examiners said identifying the stress correctly, or the intonation is up or down. So the suprasegmental features have been sometimes more of an issue, but the actual segmental, the writing.
I think most people do it pretty well.
Okay. All right. Good. Let's also talk a little bit. Places of articulation. Now, in the interviews, sometimes I've mentioned the place of articulation. Is this something you'd expect candidates to be able to do?
To my mind, it's something that strong candidates do. It's not a deal breaker for me if people don't. I think as long as people can go and explain, perhaps in terms of in terms of which they're going to be speaking to their learners, then that's fine. So if somebody sort of says, well, you put your tongue up at the front part of your mouth and hold it up there, that's what you're going to be saying to your students. You're not necessarily going to be making references to alveolar ridges and all the rest of it. But obviously a strong candidate has got that kind of terminology to hand. But as I say, it's not a deal breaker to me if within reason they can't do it. I mean obviously there is certain things you would expect any candidate to know, but the specific places of articulation and things like to my mind, no.
Okay, and that's what pretty much the other examiners say. I mean, yes, if it's strong candidates demonstrate it, but it's more important to be able to say, as you say, the tongues at the top of the teeth. Again,
and obviously you should know what a plosive is and what a fricative and
exactly. And that links quite nicely again with the off-ball framework at level 7, theoretical knowledge. If you think about what theoretical knowledge you'd need for a master's qualification of phonology, you would expect someone to know the place and manner of articulation. So that's for your stronger candidates, but you don't need to know it to pass, but strong candidates certainly do. All right. Last question, Harry. On pages 46 and 47 of the validation requirements and syllabus, there's a list of topics which the examiners will focus on, or will choose questions from. Are there any things in particular you find the trainees have difficulty with, or things which they're maybe not so strong at?
In the general discussion? Well, I think again, we have this the balance. Supposedly, most examiners probably go for 50% theory, 50% practical application. And I think it's an important thing that when you start talking about the practical application, it comes over that you know what you're talking about, basically. So by that I mean, anybody can see what that list is, and really, somebody who's gone and tried out those things over the months running up to the actual interview, people who tried it out in their own classes, maybe tried out a couple of activities where they work on assimilation, or a couple of activities where they've worked out on, intrusive sounds or whatever like that. So when the examiner goes and says to them, they've got it to hand. It's not just something they've gone and looked up in Hancock 20 minutes before the interview starts, and it comes over much better, it comes over much more authoritatively. And so I think that that you can almost sense somebody who has done this thing and knows how it works, rather than somebody who's obviously desperately trying to remember something that they read last night, type of thing about an activity they can do. So I think that that comes through very clear. People have got some kind of experience of doing these things, which of course everybody should be doing over diploma, of course.
Yeah. And again, to raise back to off-board, having a level 7 descriptors that you have are able to critically evaluate skills and knowledge and so on. And as you say, if you haven't tried it out, then you can't.
You really can't evaluate it.
And to be able to link it to your students and link it to your practice, find out what could be better, what wouldn't be. It's part of that well-rounded knowledge that you're demonstrating for a master's level kind of candidate. Okay. That's really helpful. Thank you very much, Harry.
Well, thank you, Ben.
And